Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Paul Schneider, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of People in Transition. I'm so excited about our opportunity to talk today.
Thanks a lot, Bob. I appreciate being on here.
Paul, when you were younger, who did you want to be when you, and I'm doing air quotes here, grew up?
I think I wanted to be a professional baseball player, but I don't think that happened. In college, I think I was thinking about becoming an attorney. When I graduated, I got accepted into a number of law schools, and I decided, I don't know if I could handle another 3 years of college right away. And so the school I went to, now called Benedictine and Atchison, offered me a job to work for them in college. And that's how I got started. I worked for them for a while, then I went on to work for now called Dominican University, of which I'm on their board. And then I moved over to human resources. At that time, it was called industrial relations with Reynolds. And from there, I really worked with a number of organizations, a number of HR organizations and companies, predominantly in the Chicagoland area. And I worked all the way up to becoming head of HR for a food company in town. But I decided I wanted to do something different. I think part of the issue, Bob, was I always had the responsibility of doing the reorganizations and the downsizing, and I think it took a bit of a toll on me. And I decided to really go into that business, and I started my own career transition firm in the Chicagoland area. I merged it with a couple other guys, and we built a pretty good company in really the Midwest. We had 9 offices when I sold it. And during that period of time with the new owners, I started a search firm, and I left them after my time was up there. And I'm now with Keystone Partners, a career transition, coaching, leadership development company. We're really technically located out of Boston, but great group of people, really enjoy working with them. We have offices throughout the United States and the world, and it's been a very good and rewarding experience for me. And during that period of time, in between corporate life, I, like you, got a master's degree in human resources from Loyola University.
And Paul, what transition occurrences did you experience as you were going through that career trajectory?
Yeah, I think what sort of helped me in the career that I'm in now, I think my human resource background, understanding the market, understanding the hiring process, both the internal workings of a company and the external when I, started up that search practice, understanding jobs, what companies are looking for, what the fit is. I'm a big culture person. Trying to remember who the management consultant said that culture eats strategy for lunch. And I think that's one thing people really need to understand, that really every company has a culture, which I didn't realize until I changed a couple companies. And that culture really, really affects how successful you are in that company. I also think in the career that I'm in now, normally today I normally would listen, but I have to do talking, but I normally listen to what people have to say, listen to their story, listen to what they would like to do, ask good questions, know how to write, accomplishment type resumes, not job responsibilities. I'm told I'm a good interviewer. I think that comes from both corporate and the search side. And at least in the Midwest, I'm very well networked with the companies in the area, and therefore I understand them and know what they're looking for.
Paul, you talked about that culture is something that's important to you. And if you were coaching an individual and they're looking for a particular type of culture, maybe it's more laid back, or maybe it's more entrepreneurial, or maybe it's more hard charging, or whatever it is that they're looking for, how do you think that they should find out about the culture of a company that they're talking with? And then kind of the follow-up question to that, I guess, would be, if you close to an offer with a company, but that culture just does not fit what you're looking for, is that the right job for you?
Yeah, two really good questions. The first one, and I think what really makes it great nowadays, is there's so much stuff on the internet about companies, about their culture. Do they win awards? Don't they win awards? People write reviews about them, what it's like to work for them. You got to remember, most people write negative reviews. Nobody writes positive reviews. But I think if you can find out, reading about them, or also finding people that have worked there and actually sit down and talk to them, people will give you an idea what the culture's like. And if you've got some good questions about, how do they handle this? How do they handle that? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? You'll get a really good idea of the culture. And also, as you're going into interview on the job, Bob, if people say, you ask the question, why isn't Paul here anymore? Why is there an opening? And a lot of times the company will tell you why. And that way you'll be able to determine, was Paul making his quota? Wasn't making his quota? Didn't know, the inwards and outwards of the business. That kind of gives you an idea of what the culture is and how quickly, they want you to come up to speed. So that's really the question. The other big question that really is the big one is, if the culture is not good, I recommend people think twice about taking it. Because if it doesn't work out, pretty soon, in a year or two, you may be out. And then how do you explain that in the marketplace? It didn't work out, culture wasn't good, things just weren't what I thought they were going to be. It just doesn't sound good. And I normally recommend to people that they think twice about it and maybe kind of decline the offer and look for something else. And that's a tough thing for all of us to do. Let me tell you, when you've got a bird in the hand and then all of a sudden somebody tells you maybe you ought to think twice about it. It's tough. It's a tough decision for people to make.
Paul, if you were laid off or terminated from your job, should you take time off before you start searching for that next opportunity?
I normally recommend people take a couple weeks off at least. I don't think people realize how stressful working is. And I think by taking a couple weeks off, and that's not going to affect them getting a job one way or the other, it gives them a time to think through, what do I want to do? Was this a good decision? What's my next opportunity coming down the road? I think, you need that. You need your body and your mind to wrap around it. I have found that people who do that actually do a better job in the interview process, make a better job selecting a job, than those that jump into it the next day. They're so hard charged and they don't make good decisions. And normally they really blow it in the interview process. So I recommend, I don't recommend taking a couple months off. I recommend maybe a couple weeks off and really just kind of refresh. Sports players do that. The season's ended. They all take time off to get their bodies back into shape again, to, the pressure that was put on there. And I think you need to do the same thing in the job search process.
So, Paul, what tools have you seen help people during their transition?
I think there's a couple of tools. I think out there now, it's a lot easier to find the jobs. Number one, I think the internet has helped it. The number one tool, and is probably maybe the hardest tool, is really your network. And many of us don't have a great network because we're so inwardly focused on our job. And so it takes time to really develop a network, develop support networks, job networks, and there's loads of them out there now. People are really open to helping each other out versus 30 years ago where people really didn't help anybody out. And so I think the network is number one. I think you really need to have a good LinkedIn profile now. Don't wait till you're looking for a job, because corporations and search firms use LinkedIn all the time to source you and check you out. And there's other options too for people. You're talking about tools. There's Career Builder, there's Monster, there's companies' websites have opportunities on them. And I always recommend that people always have their resume kind of in a 80% mode in case somebody calls them up and says, geez, I got this great opportunity. And at least you're pretty close to getting ready for it and sitting down and talking to people. And if necessary, there's a lot of free groups that are out there, and churches and libraries and towns that are there to help you out while you're employed. So those would be some of the tools that I'd really recommend people start thinking about.
Paul, you talked about networking, and certainly in order to accelerate your search, you need to get comfortable with engaging your network. If that asking for help or even networking itself kind of freaks you out and you freeze up, how would you coach that person to get over that?
I found that people that are in sales probably are the best networkers because they do it all the time. But I think after that, Bob, we all fall off the cliff. And especially if you're in manufacturing or accounting, I think you fall down even farther, or IT. I think there's a couple things. You don't need to have a network of 3,000 or 4,000 people. You can see these people that have LinkedIn and they got 4,000 to 5,000 contacts. You just need to have some real good ones. Your friends, coworkers, former coworkers, people that are really going to be honest with you and going to tell you what to do, or that you can really trust and talk to and develop it. And as you develop your network, keep in contact with them. I think that's one of the biggest issues that I see, that people develop this network and then they don't go back to them. It's like, hi, Bob, how are you? Geez, I'm looking for a job, and then they move on. I think what you need to do is you need to find out what Bob's interests are, what your interests are, and then kind of follow up every couple of weeks. Hey, I'm still out there, still looking. There was a great guy I worked with who actually every 3 weeks would find an article that was really good, and he'd send it out to all of his network and say, hey, I came across this. I think you might be interested in reading it. It's really good on this area or that area. And then at the end of it, he'd say, hey, just want to let you know I'm still out there looking. This is what I'm looking for. The market looks like this, market looks like that. So just keep me in mind. Wasn't hard sell, wasn't pushy, but he really developed his network. Then he found his network, gave it to other people to look at, and they contacted him, and pretty soon it kind of grew by itself. And I think people need to realize that you're not going to get a big network overnight. It's going to take time, but you also want to keep it even after you find a job.
Paul, if you could make, let's say, 2 suggestions to help people make their resumes better and stand out from the crowd, what would those 2 coaching suggestions that you'd give them?
The only people I really suggest that have a very creative resume are maybe those in advertising or maybe in marketing. But my recommendation is you go with the standard practice of, now it's white paper. It used to be light yellow, or some people had gray. I normally recommend at least 2, if not 3 pages. Sometimes just writing, the companies you work for and the jobs you held takes a page or 2. And then I would check out on the internet specific formats. Try to make sure it's accomplishment oriented, not job responsibility oriented. I always use the analogy here in Chicago. We're fortunate to have Michael Jordan, right? Great basketball player. But if you put down that he was a professional basketball player and he dribbled the ball, shot the basket, got rebounds, gave out assists, and you mentioned what his responsibilities were, you wouldn't think he was that great. But if you said won 3 or 4 most valuable players, won 6 championships, won this, won that, that separates Michael Jordan out from anybody else that he played with. And I think that's what you want to do. You want to take your resume and you want to talk about the accomplishments of the job and what you did. And everybody's got them. You just have to think about it, or sometimes you have to have people help you think about how you accomplish things, because we've all done it. We have all done it. So those really would be the couple things that I would recommend that would separate you out from other people in the marketplace.
Paul, what areas do you see people struggling with in their transition efforts?
I think the most part is really mental. I think mentally, no matter even if you know that you're going to lose your job, it's still a blow to you, to your ego. And I think that would be the number one. It's very mental. It's not very physical at all. And I use sports analogies again. Tennis and golf are highly mental sports. They are physical, maybe golf not as much, but you can watch these players sort of lose it mentally. And that's what happens to people when they lose their job. There's a mental loss of it. I think the other issue, Bob, is the unknown about, will I ever get reemployed? Will I make the same money? Will I have to move? How's it going to affect my family? And I can tell you, I've worked with over 1,000 people in my probably 30 years of doing this, probably even more than that. I have never worked with anybody who hasn't gotten a job. Probably 80% of the people have gotten better jobs, gotten more money. Turned out that was a better decision. As many of them said, man, I should have left a long time ago. But I think the unknown, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think the other thing is, leaving a company is like leaving home. I built up great relationships with people. We have some real good friendships. You will be seeing them all the time. People don't know what to say when you leave. And, I have to realize, you're going to go to a different home. You're going to meet more people and going to increase your network. And I think that's important for people to realize that you built a great relationship where you were in the past. Now you're going to build another one in the future. So those would be probably, the big things that really affect people in the transition process.
Paul, you talked about the mental aspect of the transition. How do you coach people to deal with what they might be feeling, shame, guilt, embarrassment, when they lose their job?
Yes, some people really make that transition quickly. Bam. They've moved on. For the most part, most people don't. And it takes them a while. And I tell them it comes back. Maybe years later, you'll still be thinking, geez, whatever happened? Why did I lose my job? What really went on? And I think there's a grieving process that you go through, just like if somebody dies. And I think you really got to coach them through it. And I think the more people go out in the network process, talk to other people that have been through it, I think they realize that I'm not the only one who feels this. There's other people that feel this. And, it's always going to be there, and you're always going to feel funny about it. But you have to realize that it's part of life. As my mother used to say, life is not fair. And so you sit down with people. I always start the meetings off with anybody I work with is, how you feeling today? What's going on? How's the family? And you can see people start turning the page, or if necessary, you bring in the family and you have the family part of it. And many times the family supports what's going on. And many times they say, geez, Mom or Dad, I'm glad you're not there anymore. We get to see more of you. It was a tough job. We'll find something better and we'll all stick together. Many times for the family, it brings them together. So those are some of the things you do. It takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight.
Today, many initial interviews are done either on the telephone or through Zoom. Is there a way that a candidate could prepare themselves for that telephone or Zoom interview so that they are more successful at it?
Yeah, I think on both sides, though, Bob. I think the people that are doing the interviewing are just as nervous as those who are being interviewed. Oh, I think for all of us. Yeah. So let me just talk about the interviewee, right? I always tell them, try to do one with a friend. A Zoom. Let's talk Zoom. A Zoom meeting with a friend. Make sure you look business professional. Make sure your background, you don't have an aquarium in the background. It's kind of bland in the back. That you have plenty of light so it doesn't look like you're dead. Some people, the lighting looks like they're in a morgue. And I think that's the way to start it out. I think the good part about a Zoom thing is you could put papers out that you've got, maybe questions for the interviewer, answers that you want to make sure people know about. And the hard part is it's constant eye contact. You can't move your eyes back and forth. And I think you have to stay in touch with the person. It's very difficult to pick out the vibes, the culture fit. I think people are getting better at it. I think both sides are getting better at it. And the Zoom thing is tough right now. And really not a lot of people like doing it, but it's just the way it is. Over the phone's a lot easier. You don't have the eye contact as much. You can kind of look around. You can kind of make notes. I always tell people to make notes while they're interviewing because you want to come back to certain things. Find out how long it's going to be. If they say it's a 60-minute thing, kind of watch the time and say, how are we doing on time? And then at the end of every interview, you should always say, so what's the next step, Bob? Where are we? Are there any other things that you need to know about me and to learn from my experience? And the interviewers are good about saying, yeah, I'll get back to you. This is the setup. We got 6 more people to talk to, but at the end of 3 weeks, we'll know where we're at. At the end of 3 weeks, send them a note. Ask them, is there a possibility just to follow up to see how things are going? But the big thing is at the end of the Zoom meeting, make sure you've got the person's email address. Send her a note. Thank her for her time. Answer any questions that you felt you didn't answer well. And send it off within a day or two. Let them know you're interested and move from there. But Zoom is the way of the world right now.
Yeah, I did a Zoom interview with a candidate not too long ago and spent the better part of the 30 minutes looking at their cat's rear end. So I understand the change that it has caused in us all. So
yeah, right.
Paul, how do you think a recruiter or a hiring manager reacts today when they hear that you've been laid off? And I guess the corollary question to that is how can I better manage that message about being laid off?
I think there's a couple things to think about. Being laid off now has really probably affected everybody. And if it hasn't affected you, it's affected somebody in your family. So the stigma of that is not as great as it was 30 years ago, where people always felt you were damaged goods. Even though, as you and I both know in HR, many times, 2 companies come together and it's the acquired company, people get all the good jobs, and it's the one who's been acquired, people lose their job, no matter how good they are or not. I mean, it just happens. And people didn't understand it that way then as they do now. I think you need a couple things. I always tell people that when they leave their job, make sure that they control the communication as to why they left. Okay. And if our new boss came in, wanted his own people, which happens a lot in the marketplace, make sure people know that. So when you do go in and interview and they say, why aren't you with the ABC company anymore? Say, I was there 6 years. We had some organization changes. We got a new boss. And she brought in her own HR finance person. And, nothing against what I did. I think you'll find out if you talk to everybody. It's just that she was really looking for somebody that she had worked with and she trusted. And that's it. I wouldn't go into much detail. this is what's happened. And people have heard that before. Or my company was acquired. My company is now moving to another location and they want us down there, and I'm not going to relocate my family. It's really culture fit, change of leadership, change of companies, company moves, loads of reasons why. Or in this case, the market changed. If you're in hospitality, you're in restaurants, you're in airlines, you're in cruise ships, you lose your job. Everybody understands why.
Paul, do you think doing volunteer work can help someone who's looking for their next job?
That's really a great point. I never thought about that as I was preparing for this. I believe that we all need to give back. And I think doing volunteer work shows all of us, especially when you're unemployed, you got time. It's a good diversion. I always tell people to spend about 30 hours a week on their job search and the rest of the time do something else. But I think you go out there and you say, boy, I really got it bad. And then you go do some volunteer work. And you think, I don't have it bad at all. These people have it worse. And I think it kind of lifts up your spirits. People really, really are thankful that you're helping them out. And I think it's a great idea, Bob. Great idea. But people should. I think, they have extra time, do volunteer work, give back. And many times people continue doing it after they're back in the workplace.
Paul, someone once told me any job is better than no job at all. How do you feel about that statement?
Yeah, that was a big statement 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I remember my mother saying to me, just take a job, just get a job. I think it was the old Depression mentality. I don't recommend that unless you're really in a serious strait, financially and stuff. My concern is always, if it doesn't work out, how do you explain it to people that you took this job and then, it just didn't turn out? Because people will ask questions about, well, why didn't it turn out? Why did you take it in the first place? What made that job different than this job? And you really get into a tough cycle. My only recommendation is, if the market isn't really good or, financially you can't wait any longer, then take it and try to make the best of it as you possibly can. But I always recommend that if you can sit out another couple weeks, maybe a month, something will come up. I mean, right now, the market is really good. The market is very good out there. People are getting jobs pretty quick, so if you can hold off for a little bit longer, something better will come along.
Paul, any books or other resources that you'd recommend to someone who's going through a job transition?
Yeah, there used to be a whole bunch of them out there, people peddling their ideas. I think, I've read a lot of the books and looked at a lot of books. Everybody's trying to sell something different, right? And I'm not too sure all of their ideas are really appropriate in the marketplace, but people are trying to sell things. I always tell people the best advice or best book you can get is to talk to people that have been in transition. And what did they learn? Because I have found that markets are different in different localities, in different areas of the United States. And some people may say, the way I got a job was really through this source or that source or whatever source. And so I think the best thing to do is networking, is to sit down and ask people, how did you find a job when you were out? Who did you talk to, or what were good search firms that, would have jobs in this area? I think getting it from the horse's mouth is better than reading it, because they'll tell you what they learned and what worked and didn't work. And that really, for me, is the best book, the book of knowledge, the hard knocks book of knowledge.
Paul, if our listeners only remember three things as they go through their own personal job transition, what are the three things that you want to leave them with?
Well, I would say a couple, Bob. In the job search, the first thing is have a positive attitude in looking for a new job. Look at it as a learning adventure. You're going to meet new people. You got to learn about new industries. You got to learn about new companies. Look upon it as if you were 6 and all of a sudden you're in the backyard looking at all these leaves and animals running around, right? So, and I think that's important. Nobody wants to work with somebody who's got a sour attitude or upset that they lost their job. Nobody does. So really be positive. Say, you know what? It was a good job where I had it. Good company, love the people, but now I'm looking for something better. I talked to her about my mom before. She had loads of sayings, but she used to say, life is not fair. And, we just got to keep moving forward. What I found an issue in the job search process is follow up, follow up, follow up. People don't do that. Stay in touch with your network. Let them know where you're at without being a bother. Every 3 or 4 weeks, like I said, send a note. This is what's going on. Read this article. This really turned out well. That's number one. Number two is after an interview, or you meet somebody about every 3 weeks again. I mean, emails are terrific. Don't call. Send an email. Hey, I'm just following up with a job interview that we had. I'm just kind of interested in, am I still a candidate? Are you still looking for somebody? I'm still interested in you. Please let me know. Because a lot of times you find out that they don't know if you're still interested. I think the other thing is, don't, even if you get a job offer, don't stop looking until you start on the job. The reason I say that is, and people really don't want to talk about it very much, but I've really witnessed people accepting a job, and then for some reason, a new boss comes in before they start, and the new boss decides we're going to rescind that offer. The market changes and jobs get pulled. I've seen it where companies offered somebody a job, and the next thing you know, somebody wants to buy them. And so all jobs are then put on hold. Or it's what happened to my son. He had a job and, 9/11 hit, and he was just coming out of college. And I said to him, you better start looking for another job because all these jobs that are going to be put on hold, and they were. And he ended up going into teaching for a period of time. So until you start, don't stop looking. And I know people feel funny about it, but you don't want to be that 10% that for some reason the job is pulled. And that has nothing to do with, people doing a background check on you. It really has to do with the market is very volatile now. So kind of keep that in mind. And then I think I'm going to throw a fourth one in here for you, Bob. I have, take a risk. I have seen where people have gone in for an interview and the company says, geez, I know you're good for this, but we really like your background for this over here. And people say, oh, I've never thought about it. No, I don't want to take that risk. And I always tell them, the company has seen something in you that they really like. And what do you have to lose? If you're there for a year or two and it doesn't work out, you got new skills, new experiences. You can easily say, the company put me in this job, didn't work out. I really tried it. Nobody minds a risk taker being on their staff. Or you may end up years later. Give you a good example. Guy worked for me in HR, was in HR. One of the groups he was with was purchasing. Purchasing people said to him, we'd really like you to work for us. And he said to me, what do you think? I said, what do you got to lose? He took the job. He ended up as head of purchasing and supply chain for a $50 billion company. Moved entirely away from HR. Took the risk. And so I recommend that people kind of take a look at the risk also and try it. Can I just kind of final thoughts here, Bob?
Sure.
If you got
please.
Just time? Just a couple things. For the people out there looking for a job, you are going to find another job. I don't know of anybody that I haven't known or worked with after all these years who hasn't found a new position. Okay? Keep that in mind. You will find another job. The second thing is it's all about culture fit. Men are more interested in name, position, salary, location, who they report to. They're the hardest ones that I have to talk to about culture fit. Women, on the other hand, are a lot better. They hone in on the people. the company, the culture, how they treat people. I mean, they do a so much better job of figuring out culture fits. So for you guys out there, keep that in mind, all right? Don't forget your network. Thank all the people who supported you during this tough time, because people will remember those who reach out and thank them and let them know where they are at. The studies show that only 30% of the people who get a job get back to their network and thank them. 30%, not very good. And people remember that. People remember that, those who didn't get back to them. So keep that in mind. Consultants, if you're out there looking, are a great source of job openings. They know future jobs and they know current jobs that are open because they're there consulting with companies. Don't forget them, not only to network with them, but also to, remember them when you need a consultant. And then finally, and I think you really brought this up, Bob, kind of continue to upgrade your skills and your network. And I think I liked your idea about, working for a nonprofit or an association or helping other people out. There's loads of things out there you can do, but now's the time to do it. I've had people get their CPAs, get professional associations, get certifications. And so that's really, really something for you to really upgrade your skills while you've got this time. So that's kind of my final thoughts for you, buddy.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Once again, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk today. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.